Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Welcome to Trading Card Therapy, episode number 57. I'm your host, the Doctor. Thanks for tuning in today. Before we get right into the thick of it, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this weekend, we of course will be exhibiting, and it's going to be great to meet people, but there is a fantastic convention in the King of Prussia, Pennsylvania area, just a few miles away from the mall, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Check out all the details, thephillyshow.com. First thing we're going to cover today, it's the first time I've ever done it. That's right, believe it or not, I've been in this hobby for several decades, but I've never done what I'm about to reveal. That's right. I traded my first ever Babe Ruth card. And I'm going to show you exactly which card I traded. This 1933 Goudey Babe Ruth. And there's a reason why I'm putting my thumb over the grade. I'm curious. Take a moment. If you're watching this, let me know in the chat what you think the grade of this Ruth is. And you'll see how this ties to another point I'm going to cover later in today's episode. So this particular card, which of course now, as I show it on camera, I'm going to reveal in just a minute what the grade is. Someone from our Vintage Breaks community had reached out to me, and he is working on the 1933 Goudey set. So for anyone who knows a little bit about collecting, but maybe doesn't know the exact number of cards in that set or the highlights, aside from the Lajoie rarity, the main cards are the 4 Babe Ruth cards and the 2 Lou Gehrig cards. And as we've all been collectors, most likely if you're listening to and watching this podcast, we've all been in a situation where we're trying to complete a set and a few of the cards that we still need are very expensive. Well, that's where I come in. And so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Leighton Sheldon. I am the owner of Just Collect, and you can check out my company at justcollect.com. So Jim has been a long-time member, meaning many years, a member of our Vintage Breaks community. But even more importantly, Jim and I have become friends. Friends from the hobby, through the hobby, but make no mistake, we've talked about many a life issue. And Jim, if you're watching, thank you for your friendship. So Jim, as I mentioned, was approaching the finish line and still is. But one of the cards, as I mentioned, was the number 181, 1933 Goudey Babe Ruth that he still needs for his set. And because of the cost, he had seen me show it off on likely a prior episode of either Trading Card Therapy or one of our Vintage Breaks live streams or my other podcast, Leighton's Loft, which is the first Wednesday of every month. So Jim dropped me a line initially after seeing it and said, I love the eye appeal of the card. And for those of you that want to know the grade now, you can see it's a 3. And as Jim and I both remarked, and others have as well, it really looks great for a 3. It looks a lot closer to a 4. There's no obvious substantial wrinkles or creases. And he thought it would be a great card for him to put in his set. And he still needs number 181, Babe Ruth. So I said, Jim, well, this one's a little bit complicated because you're talking about a 5-figure card. And I don't usually make trades like this. And I certainly don't like trying to trade away Babe Ruth Goudey cards. But as I mentioned, Jim is not only a longtime member of the Vintage Breaks community, but he's a good friend of mine. And I wanted to try to help him out, but I also wanted to protect myself. So, like many of you out there, whether it be in the hobby or in your personal life, we're trying hard to set boundaries. So I know myself, I feel that maybe I'm a little bit too lenient sometimes, and I don't speak up, and I don't speak my mind. I don't mean just in the hobby, I just mean in life, right? So you want to make sure you say what you need, what you're looking for. So I said, Jim, I just want to let you know that I've never traded a Babe Ruth card before. And I've certainly never traded a Babe Ruth Goudey. However, if I was going to try, I would try with you. And I said the first place I'd like to start is establishing a value of the card. Forget about, I'm not trying to sell it to you right now. But if we don't agree on what we think the card would be worth, we're probably not going to be able to reach some sort of deal. And number two, I said, no matter what the other cards are that we potentially make part of the overall trade, I would like to receive about half of the value in cash, give or take. He said, yes, he understood. By the way, when I say cash, it doesn't actually mean cash, check, money order, PayPal, I guess wampum, pesos, depending on, what you accept. But in this case, we're just talking about a simple check. However, I'll bring up a fun point to that aspect of it towards the end of this story. So I say to Jim, listen, I need half. And as far as the cards that I'm willing to trade for, I want to tell you a few players I'm looking for. Because if you know anything about me or my company, Just Collect, we handle lots of really great pre-war collections. And if you want to read about any of the amazing stories and even see some videos in some cases, check out these stories behind the collections on our blog at blog.justcollect.com. So Jim understands we have to come up with the value first, which we actually do fairly easily. Credit to, I believe, both of us there. We are both realistic. And then I said to him, listen, for the cards that you're going to trade me, I don't need right now that much pre-war, even though, of course, I'll take it. But I'm specifically looking for those $100 to $1,000 cards of the following players from the 50s and 1960s time period. Jackie Robinson, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Sandy Koufax, and Roberto Clemente. And the reason is twofold. So number one, I don't have a ton of that in inventory at the moment. And number two, a lot of those names I just mentioned, even if I didn't get any of them to list for sale through our eBay store, which is just_collect on eBay, we utilize a lot of those names like Mantle and Jackie as bonuses or giveaways through our Vintage Breaks sister company as bonuses and giveaways and prizes. So I figured if I can save some effort and cost from having to go out and buy these cards in the secondary market, maybe, just maybe, this deal could come together. And I gave him the list. We agreed upon a rough value, and things were kind of moving along pretty well. But then there was a little bit of I wouldn't call it a monkey wrench, but something interesting happened. And I talked about this yesterday just a little bit on Leighton's Loft. So if you missed the episode, check it out. It's on Facebook. Jim was trying to deal with someone locally. And by someone, it was actually a shop. The reason why I bring it up is because he was trying to sell a few things. And he texted me. He wasn't trying to sell them to me. He just said, hey, I've received this type of offer, these offers for these several items. Leighton, I'm sorry to bother you, but could you give me your opinion? Keep in mind, he's really just asking more as a friend. And of course, yes, I'm an experienced hobbyist, as I have been an official card nerd for decades. So I said, Jim, well, I don't know, but it seems, I think I used the word gross. I said, I think it seems grossly low, but am I misreading it? And he said, Leighton, that's kind of like what I thought. And I'm like, oh, dear, Jim, I'm sorry. I'm thinking maybe he sold it or agreed to sell in principle. Well, that's where things got interesting. He didn't. So I said, Jim, if you want, and I guess I'll just mention this, they're vintage sets. Keep in mind, some of the cards were graded in the set. So I just did very rough numbers, like we've all done. Maybe you did some rough numbers for your checkbook, but it didn't quite balance. So meaning at this point, I'm not trying to buy anything from Jim. I'm really just trying to help him not get screwed. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm saying, Jim, I don't know, it seems a little low. But at this point, I'm not backing it up by saying I'll buy the cards from you. So he tells me that's what he thought. I don't really think much of it. And maybe like later that day or the next morning, we kind of text each other. And I'm like, well, are you going to sell them? Or, what's the scoop? He said, yes, I'd like to sell them, but he doesn't say much more than that. I said, Jim, well, if you give me the graded cards that are in each of these couple sets, I'll have a rough idea of the condition from what you're telling me as well as from the graded cards. And then what I'm going to do for you, once again, Jim, I'm not suggesting that you're going to sell me these cards, but I'm going to give you some rough ideas of like what I think they might be worth and then what I would pay. Fast forward, I do that, and I give him the numbers. He says, well, Late, would you maybe be interested in buying these? And I'm like, oh my God, Jim, I don't want to take the cards away from someone. It's not, listen, I need to make money, right? I do this for a living. I'm also a collector. It's how I eat. It's how my son eats, right? He's 9. So, he's a growing boy. But the joking aside, I wasn't trying to take anyone's business. However, what Jim was telling me, and he showed me, so he's offered one price. Then they actually came up $1,500, and they were still low, believe it or not. You can't do that. It's very bad to really, really lowball collectors, people, because if they know, it's even worse. And if they don't know, and you think you're getting one over on them, let me tell you, I bought and sold almost $50 million of vintage sports cards and non-sports cards. And if I try on each deal to crush everyone, make the most possible money, and screw everyone over, whatever it takes, yeah, you know what? You're right. You might get a couple deals like that, but you won't get the luxury of being able to do this for a few decades. Or, to be fair, right, I'm a proud father. I like looking at my son Crosby and telling him a little bit about what I do, how I do it, and that he can definitely tell from it that I'm proud of it. So anyway, getting back to center, I'm like, Jim, I don't know what you want to do here, but I'm not trying to buy your cards. He said, Leighton, you're not doing anything wrong. Can I send you the cards to look at? I said, all right, I'll look at the cards. I'm going to give you the numbers, and you're going to see how this all ties back to the Babe Ruth Goudey. The first time I've ever traded any Babe Ruth card, let alone a 1933 Goudey Babe Ruth. Jim sends in the sets. We verify them. I gave him a range of what I would pay. It was a little bit higher than the low end of the range, but it was not the highest end of the high end part of the range because I didn't feel comfortable. I told him as such, and he said, Leighton, if I had not shared with you what I was feeling, I actually would have got several $1,000s less. So I really appreciate you being fair, and you've been transparent, and I'm going to sell you the sets. Great, Jim, I really appreciate the opportunity to earn your business. Then I just wasn't thinking about it because it was just separate at this point. He goes, Late, I'd like to use 6,000 of those dollars towards, yep, you guessed it. That's the half or so cash, right? That we are going to use. And now we had the basis of really hammering out the deal. And what's awesome about this, and I suggest you do this, whether it be locally with your LCS or a local dealer, or to be fair, right, come down to this weekend in Philly. I'd like to think I'm not the only person who would show this courtesy to your customer or customers, meaning, gang, I'm being as transparent as I can. I love cards. I didn't want to trade a Babe Ruth Goudey, but I did to help a friend. And when you take the emotion out of it, I was willing to sell the Ruth because I have another number 181 Ruth. Don't tell anyone. Jim knows that, I'm sure. But joking aside, if I was going to trade one, I couldn't have thought of a better home. So what was really cool is that we now had the basis for the deal. He had the cash he needed, even though I didn't think about it because I just thought this is a separate deal. It was for more than that. And he said, nope, send me the difference. I'm going to use the 6 towards the Ruth. We didn't have anything worked out yet. But as I'm about to reveal to you, this is the stack of cards that Jim and I agreed to, and I'm revealing them here. First up is absolutely one of my favorite cards from the 1950s. This card could be hanging on any museum wall just by itself. It's a beautiful rendering of Jackie Robinson early in his career. It's a 1950 Bowman. SGC 3.5. Next up, Jackie Robinson 1955 Topps. Second to last Topps card. What I love about this card, if you put it like your thumb like this, you'd say, "Hey, card looks near mint with really sharp corners." I'm kind of thinking the same thing. SGC, not thinking the same thing. 5. Great card for the grade. Oh, never had a really nice 63 Fleer Koufax. I don't know that I want to sell this. I'll decide later. Very well centered, extremely sharp corners. There it is, 63 Fleer Koufax PSA 8 from a very small 66 card 1963 Fleer set. Now, I said to him I wanted Mickey, and he gave me Mickey. Look at that. Pretty sharp. That's a 6. 1960 Topps. Here's another 1967 Topps, 2 years before his last regular issue Topps card. Here's more Mickey. You're starting to get the theme. What's really cool for both of us, I told Jim what I was looking for as far as players. I had a feeling he had a surplus of some of these. He hit me back with a list. We maybe made 1 or 2 small changes, and then we had a deal. He shipped it in, and we're showing it off here to the trading card therapy community. A couple more Mickeys, I believe. 68, 59 All-Star. Manager's Dream in a 6. Not an easy card to find in high grade. I feel like this is one of the more affordable mantle cards. Yes, it's featuring him and Ken Boyer, but you can buy this card ungraded in VG-ish for like $50. And I bet you this card in the 4 is maybe 100-ish or so. Not too many Clementes in this deal, but love the 66 Topps. Really distinguished look there by Clemente. Just in terms of Willie Mays cards, I always love the fact when you have a number 1 card of the set be an iconic Hall of Famer great like Willie Mays. This card is $100 or less. 67 Mays, just at first glance, you're like, oh, that's a solid mid-grade card. Wait, it got a 3? Pretty good. All right, 62 Topps Koufax, SGC 3.5. That concludes the deal. We talked enough about this trade, but we are now going to ship out Mr. Ruth to Jim, and I believe he's under 10 cards left for the set. We'll let everyone know when he finishes. We're going to make a big announcement through the Vintage Breaks community. And if you want to check out, by the way, our Vintage Breaks stream, we stream 7 days a week. Doesn't cost anything to attend. Some people just come to hang out and they never buy anything. They come for the freebies. They come for the free samples. They come for the chat. They leave with memories. Come check us out at youtube.com/Vintage Breaks. All right. Next up, this is very quick, but with the card show coming up this weekend, I'm going to encourage you to do this. If you are shopping for a Hank Aaron rookie at the show, don't start by looking at all the grades. I might work with a friend. Let's just say it's this 33 Goudey Ruth. Pretend it's a Hank Aaron. Hey, can I see that pile of Hank Aaron rookies you have? And I would try to look at each one. I would put my finger over the grade, regardless of the grading company. And I would ask myself, do I like this card? Then, and only then, would I take my finger off the grade and I would look at it and say, I like this Babe Ruth, and that kind of looks like a pretty nice 3. If you do that, at the very least, it's a fun experiment. But if you do that, I guarantee you that the next time you go to your LCS or a card show, or you get together with your buddy, and I used to do this all the time. I get together with, trading dates, right? You'd play baseball or basketball, and then last hour, get out our cards, and we'd swap, we'd trade. Do that at the show, maybe this weekend in Philly. You'd be surprised when you start focusing on the cards that you like. You don't worry about the grade. I think you're going to be real happy with a few of the value propositions that you'll find out there for your collection. Interesting comment before we get to our last point. So I was talking to someone the other day that they're gainfully employed outside the hobby. Like many of us during COVID experienced some changes in our lives. Said, I'm getting a little burnt out. I'd like to maybe relook at this hobby I once knew as a kid. He did. had a lot of fun, has been acquiring some really great cards. Now, the reason our paths cross, he started to focus more on quality and not quantity. There's no right or wrong way to eat Reese's, that's for sure. And we're talking about the hobby and his journey the last few years. And he said, Late, I knew I was in trouble with the hobby, even though I loved it when I initially came back. I had all these cards, and when I had to start dealing with things, meaning grading or selling, any of these things in between, it started feeling like work. And let's be candid. I play tennis a couple times a week. If it felt like work and I hated it, I wouldn't play tennis. So I think he was dead on. I really appreciate him sharing with me his journey, because he took that and said, I got into this because I want to have some fun and have it be a nice distraction. It was no longer not only a nice distraction, it started to feel like an onerous task I had to take on. And then he found, for example, like he could sell through auction houses or consign to eBay places like Probstein, or maybe deal with someone like myself, the owner and proprietor of Just Collect, meaning I will buy your cards outright for cash and let you know what I think they're worth. I'll tell you what I think I'll pay. And even if we don't reach a deal, I can guarantee you will leave our interaction better off than you started, because you'll have some really great, solid information. Well, I'm glad he mentioned that, because I know for me, I am working this weekend. I'm working at the Philly show. I don't have my son this weekend. But let me tell you, I'm working. I'm going to be having some fun. I encourage you to do the same. With that, I am having some fun with the last point. Unbelievable pack we had recently on our website at vintagebreaks.com. We were offering a 1955 Topps All-American Cello pack, and we sold it by the card. So for those of you a little bit new maybe to the Vintage Breaks community, about 20 cards in the packs, call it 20 cards. We sold 20 spots. And we sold each spot, I think it was $5.25, but I want to misspeak, maybe $4.95, I'm not sure. And that guaranteed you one card. We do everything at random, but you would know before we open the pack, like, hey, I have card number 3 and number 17 in this break. Well, I don't know which card number this was in the break. We didn't get the Jim Thorpe, but golly, we pulled a really sweet card. We pulled a 1955 Topps 4 Horsemen. It's the second best card of the set. It's a beautiful card of the famous Notre Dame backs. You can Google it. I don't have to give a history lesson here. And this card recently came back a PSA 8. Charles from the Vintage Breaks community was the one who hit it. As it says here on the back, one of the greatest backfields to ever ride the gridiron wars was Notre Dame's 4 Horsemen. Elmer Layden, Jim Crowley, Harry Stuhldrayer, and Don Miller. Together, they could pass, kick, and run. Their combined talents led the Irish to an undefeated season and a Rose Bowl victory. But just look at the artwork. For those of you that don't know, this is not an original photo. This was actually drawn. Those 4, just incredible. Behind it, of course, that's real photography from the field. But the way they overlaid the 4 Horsemen there, it's just a beautiful card. It's been one of my favorites forever. Well, Charles gets the card graded through Vintage Breaks and our PSA grading service. For those of you that don't know, we offer that service for those who pull cards they'd like to get graded with PSA or SGC. We will do that and manage the process for you. So Charles gets the card graded. Everyone's super excited. It got an 8. Everyone wants a higher grade, but of course, he thought it was fairly enough graded. He would consider selling it. So I heard he'd be willing to sell this card. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to put it right here. I want to own it. And I wanted to own it, and I wanted to buy it, to hold on to for a long time, and God willing, maybe one day, my son will have the pleasure of owning it if he really enjoys collecting. We reached a deal instantaneously on the phone, and most of all, I'm appreciative and grateful that it was pulled live on our stream and had the opportunity to buy it, because he could put it out on eBay for 6 times the amount he wants. He could put it at a show. Same thing, 3.5 times what he wants. Charles, thank you, my friend, for being reasonable. Charles is an OG from the Vintage Breaks community. And once again, very thankful for this. But that is not the main point of this card. Believe it or not, what also drew me to this card is that there is video provenance. There is video evidence showing this card being pulled from a 1955 time capsule, which is a 1955 Topps All-American Cello Pack. Do I ever know if a video evidenced pull of a vintage card will be worth more than a regular PSA 8? I got no idea. But let me tell you, you can look by the smile on my face. I don't care. I think it's super cool. It's like the cat's meow, right? And just so you heard it here first, there's not a lot of vintage being opened live on air, but we do it 7 days a week here at Vintage Breaks on our YouTube stream at youtube.com/vintage breaks. But if you want to see epic moments like this, tune in. If you want to see epic cards like this being pulled, tune in. And I think that in the future, not just for vintage, but for the really important, especially non-numbered pulls of modern cards that are worth a lot of money, if there is video evidence, video provenance supporting that pull, I believe collectors like myself, collectors like ourselves, are going to value that highly. With that, we are going to wrap up our 57th episode, believe it or not, number 57 of Trading Card Therapy. But I'm throwing out a little teaser for next week because I got a lot of feedback on last week's episode, number 56, talked about collectors / PSA's acquisition of SGC. You're not going to want to miss next week's episode of Trading Card Therapy, where I take a deeper dive into what I think is going to happen with everything going on with PSA and SGC. Thanks for watching.